player will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Getting back to some of the Vision card reviews, just as they come out to give some general thoughts, bring attention to some things. I wanted to bring up the Blood of the Future Vision card that just came out this week. Brand new Holo Vision card alongside Young Eld, the new water Pierce unit in the game. And so we're going to talk through the attributes themselves, how they fit into the job vision card synergies, if you will, and then just some major considerations at the end, whether or not you should pull, whether it should benefit your account, and really just kind of talk through things to help you make the most informed decision you can if you're on the fence about pulling it. Now, to start things off, let's actually get the title of this slide right. There we go. Let's kick things off. The equipments on this job are for Spear, Sword Red Mage, and Staff Devout. This is obviously exceptionally important anytime you start off looking at a vision card where you talk about what characters fall into those categories, how many things already exist between the two of them, are there characters you're looking forward to mingling together. And so out of these three, there are a fair amount of meta, at least current, units that seem to have a lot of good synergy together. We'll explore those all soon, but in the meantime, the Holo effect, which is their version of power creep, if you will, it really only applies to the quest type content, which is like storyline stuff, and it's Pierce Attack 3 and Crit Rate 3 permanently, no matter what. That's a terrible Holovision effect. Do not pull this card for the Holovision effect. But next, we'll look at the stats themselves. 320 HP, 143 attack, 3 defense, and 53 dexterity. Overall, pretty healthy stats. The dexterity is certainly a nice small critical rate boost. We'll talk about that in the end, just exactly how to quantify that, but as a starting spot for HP and attack, pretty good. That's where most cards are. And now for the unit effects. For the unit that's equipping this no matter what, they will get Magic Res 15%. And then there are some special attributes that if you're a member of the Leonis family, you get AOE Res of 10%. If you're Eld, Mont, or Stern, or the males of the family, attack 20%. And if you're any of the Helena's versions, magic of 20%. And this does apply to any of the version of their characters. Now for the party effects for those Spears, Sword Red Mage, and Staff Devouts, it's AOE Res of 24%, so definitely above average for what that metric typically brings, HP of 25%, and critical rate of 20. We're going to really hard focus on these attributes when we talk about comparing and contrasting the vision card. But the very last thing for the quest as part of the Holovision thing is that anyone with these equipment types will get a decrease of AP consumption of 15% for quest type content, which again is a very low priority type of content. I would consider this a non-factor in our decision. But now that we've kind of looked at this, let me just talk about some noteworthy thoughts just to punt the ball and see where things land. Number one, AOE Res of 24% is one of the most valuable main slot vision card stats you can have. It's also the highest percent at this time of what AOE resistance can achieve. So that obviously is a nice star of approval. Now, prior to this card coming out, what are the pre-existing AOE Res job cards for these different classes? Well, Spear has 1 AOE Res card. Sword Red Mage has 3 of them, so we'll look at that a little closer. And the Devout only has 1 of the AOE type cards. Now, for that 53 dexterity that I pointed out, it is a nice small bump to the crit rate. I use this as a sample build of my Eld from the character review, that without this vision card, he's at 461 dexterity, which is a 114% crit rate, just based off that stat alone. And this vision card, if you add the 53, would bump him up to 514 dexterity. That's 122% crit rate, so about an 8% extra, all things considered. It's not enormous, but again, that's one of those stats like evasion, like attack, what it may be. It just kind of adds up over time. But at least wanted to quantify this for you when you get these 400 to 500 level dexterities. Now, the bestowed effect of the 15% magic res is a bit niche. It's very nice in the short term, where we are seeing this magic meta of sorts from Soul to Helena the Black Rose to Vivi to who knows what comes out next. And as we've kind of talked about before, this has more value for magic imperils like Helena the Black Rose's Limit Break than it really does for damage mitigation, because a lot of these magic damage dealers can ignore magic res. Vivi can even get up to 80% plus, but most magic units only get around 30 to 40 magic res pen. So all things considered, it's not the worst stat, but definitely very niche. I don't think it's one of the stronger things of this card. But the bestowed AOE res of 10 for anyone in the Leonis family, any of their characters, certainly nice, because there are some very relevant units in that grouping. Obviously the new Young Eld, the OG Fire King Mont, Winged Stern of the Light Element, Helena the Black Rose, and amongst some of the others. But these are characters that do get usage that this certainly is a nice benefit to them. Now, not all of them are part of the classes on this vision card, but that's where you get some of that rainbow potential that you want to weave someone in, you get 10 AoE res on them. But let's go through categorically now each one of these categories to just kind of ask the question, do they need an AOE res percent card? And obviously the HP and crit rate are certainly big factors in this too, but this is a great jumping off spot. And for Spear, the one that already exists is with the setting sun. That's the Bridal Alliance vision card. It's for axe, fists, and gloves. And this one obviously has a totally different overlap where it's for only Sword Red Mage and Staff Devout. So for the Spear group in particular, this covers a completely different set of synergies for what overlaps, and there's obviously different team iterations. But I do think a noteworthy thing to point out here, with the setting sun is only 16% AoE res. So this is objectively a fair amount stronger just in that percent alone. So while you might say to yourself, well, I already have one, do I really need another? The answer could be yes, because it's, again, totally different set of classes, and it's objectively a lot stronger, 8% more AoE res. Now we look at Sword Red Mage. This is where we probably should do a slight deeper dive, and so we will. They have 4 of them currently: A Party for All, Meeting in the Moonlight, Seaside Showdown, and this new Blood of the Future. Now A Party for All, very niche in that it's just gun and dagger. That's the old Sylvie vision card that came out, and Meeting in the Moonlight is the new unique Dwayne one they made. That's Staff, Black Mage, and Katana. Again, both these very slightly niche in terms of what other categories are on them, but Seaside Showdown's a very good one. That's Book, Fists, and Katanas. And again, kind of the same concept here. A Party for All and Meeting in the Moonlight, and I'll bring them up very quickly here. A Party for All is only 16% area res, and so objectively a lot weaker, and it's the 30 human killer on magic attacks only. So for Spear units, that's obviously super niche, no real value. The crit rate does have some overlap. Obviously, it's the same as the current card. So from a party effect perspective, this one's still okay. I think the other Spear card is definitely better for more reasons we'll see soon. But the second one here, the Meeting in the Moonlight, this is 20% area res. So again, slightly less. Definitely more than A Party for All. This at least has the human killer on physical attacks. There's some crit evade, which certainly is nice. I actually do still like this vision card very much. It's really just a question of what other overlaps there are. And so for Sword Red Mage, they have... We've seen, at this point, 3 already existing vision cards for different kinds of parties. This one, same thing as before, opens up a brand new door where none of the other vision cards have Spear or Staff Devout on them. So for the Sword Red Mage, and again, I'll bring up the next one here, the Seaside Showdown. If we look at the Sword Red Mage class and looking at the characters specifically, between Summer Glaciella, Dwayne, Charlotte, there's a couple centerpiece units here that people still use as their primary tank character. Obviously, some of these other characters are a bit more power creep, but still have some good overall usage. Obviously, the Ice Bros and Faris are very popular nowadays. Miranda is still a very low-key, awesome water unit that a lot of people are using for anti-evasion. And so for Sword Red Mage, I do think it's still a valuable one to open up a new door of synergies, considering that there are a lot of characters that already exist to kind of be the foundation of their parties. And so finally, that brings us to the Staff Devout class, which they only have one currently. It's the Silver Memories. It's Book, Greatsword, and Glove. So this, again, opens up a totally different set of synergies with them. So I personally like giving the Staff Devout class more accessible parties to get into, because there are a fair amount of Staff Devout characters, and we'll talk about a couple soon, that do want to get into rainbow parties, and this will certainly enable them to. But let's look at the card itself. Again, full credit to JB79 on all of these slides here. These are exceptional in how they're laid out. The actual characters that are eligible for this, I mean, the first things that come to mind when I look at the characters are, who am I still kind of using with relative frequency, or at least I've seen some people using with relative frequency. And there's a decent amount in all of these different elements. Obviously, ice and water very much stand out, but even fire, very noteworthy combo of Soul and Shells, are both eligible to be on this vision card. For limited content, I know Galzak is still very popular, and Dialdo kind of synergizes with that too. Wind is a little bit light, really only flagged by Glaciella, but she's still a top tier unit and a major Pierce unit. So if we talk about the mono Pierce teams, there's obviously a ton of great Spear units on here that will benefit and be able to collaborate with these other units. The light and dark characters may be a little bit bygone in terms of who you're using, but overall I still think there's some very core units that you can make some very interesting parties here, not only from the mono element perspective, but the dual element perspective when you talk about water and ice, but then even the mono Pierce, which obviously we'll talk again about soon. But for now, the considerations to pull when I'm looking at this, to me, number one is if you have a seasoned water account. I do like this because obviously is a major card for young Eld, but there's a lot of good centerpiece units on here where Summer Glacielle is among the top of them. Faris is, again, huge increase in her popularity as of late with the Pixel Remaster coming back. Amnelis has seen a huge uptick with Soul and just her general, rising tides lift all boats with the magic meta. She's gotten comparably better. Miranda's still very good. Gurn's back for limited content. So overall, water, this kind of fits down the line for a lot of these units. The other thing for me is if you've invested heavily into Dialdo or Summer Glaciella, two perfect centerpiece tanks for different kinds of rainbow teams and iterations, they are units on this card that you can very easily build around in ways that you can't without this vision card. The other one is if you have an affinity for Soul or Shells, where if you are relying on Soul and really enjoy that character and Shells to kind of play that support, doesn't have to be her, but just honorable mention, that Soul now gets a second AoE res card that he can completely branch out on what teams you can put him in. Now, the other one is if you are looking for some water and ice overlap. Now, if you recall, Dark Odin has the unit res on it. This has the AoE res on it. And while there are other viable options for overlap of their AoE cards, if you figure that the Seaside Showdown is another AoE res card, and I'll just bring it up here again. If you're looking at Seaside Showdown, just from the Sword Red Mage alone, between water and ice, you're seeing a lot of those same units between those two classes. So while I do still like this for water and ice, it's just not a huge upgrade from Seaside Showdown. That's why when I talk about the Mono Pierce teams, this is where I think this card is the cement to glue all future Mono Pierce teams. Where again, if you're talking about Dialdo as that tank, Young Eld and Flagbearer Glacial next to him, if you wanted like a balanced offense, if you wanted full offense, you could throw Summer Jaden in there. If you wanted some support, you go Shells with two of these spear units. Flagbearer Glacial is tanky enough that she can frontline, and so isn't Young Eld. They both do very well with that. But this is a permanent pool card, so there isn't really a rush to pull it. JB and I are both in consensus from our tier list that we did a couple weeks ago on the podcast that this is an S tier vision card. It is the glue for a lot of very meta defining units that will allow them to weave in and out of new teams. And even for some of those dual element teams where you have only two of a certain element, there's a lot of really strong characters on this vision card. In addition to the fact that it's got some really great stats for these brawlier, bulkier types of units that if you can give characters like Young Eld, Faris, Soul, 20% HP, that's a huge amount of survivability for them on a main slot vision card, in addition to the enhanced AoE resistance. Obviously has some great short-term value with the 15% magic resistance you can get. I think most people probably could wait on this vision card, just alone from the fact that it's permanent pool, but those that are tempted to pull it, that want to put it to use, you're definitely going to get some really good value out of it. It is an S-ranked vision card for sure that will enable a fair amount of teams as time still continues to go on. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, everybody. Talk to y'all soon.